Your very own special copy of Adaptive Rifle. You'll have it eventually, sir.
No, I know.
Someday, very, very soon.
I read the digital one.
Oh, yeah, the elusive digital copy. Welcome. It is time for another Redneck Live. We don't have a whole lot of trolling to talk about tonight, Matt. We have actual serious training stuff to talk about.
Yeah, serious training stuff.
Well, okay, so you've been doing an 80-day thing that you're posting up on Instagram every day. Can you talk through what that is and what you're trying to get out of it?
Yeah, it started basically with I was just because of and of proximity to training right now, I decided to do one setup for 80 straight days to see if that if I could make like some serious performance gains or changes or what I could get out of that and what that looked like.
All right,
it started.
So what do you mean one setup?
So I am normally dry firing between competition gear, duty equipment like a ALS retention holster, concealed equipment, and rifle setups.
Yes,
like constantly.
I'm so curious what you're going to say about this because, all right, I spent my entire shooting career until probably 2018. It was like one gun, one setup. That's what you shoot. Period. You just shoot that.
Yeah.
And now I'm changing belts constantly, like what you're talking about. Different belts, different guns, different stuff in the same day,
Yeah.
usually.
Right. And so was I. I mean, and I'll tell you where I'm at right now with, well, historically training like that was, to me, that was normal. You know, I had stuff that I had to do out of ALS, like a duty setup, my work gear. And then I had kind of personal goals that I wanted to do out of competition gear. And then I had sort of what I would call like responsibility goals of things that I wanted to do from concealment. So it was like a natural progression, and it kept a lot of variation and kept it very, very interesting.
All right. But what I would say, all right, I don't know if this is true, but I could just speak to my own experience, I guess. I feel like when you just train with one gun, one set of gear constantly, you get to this point where you have such a kind of an intuitive relationship. Like you're so friendly with that equipment that you find that around the edges, there's stuff that you can do with it that you couldn't do without that constant practice on the same. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I completely know what you're saying.
Do you feel like
I
you're
think,
experiencing that?
yeah, right now, you mean from concealment?
Well, not maybe it's not the concealment thing. Maybe it's just said, hey, I'm sticking on one set of gear for X amount of time, period.
Right. What I've noticed, so I'm about 44 days into this, and initially it was, you know, a lot of things tightened up really, really quickly in terms of consistency. Basic mistakes that I would make before on the gun handling side, just they don't happen anymore, or I haven't had one in quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've also known though, in terms of, I would say like gains or how like developmental wise, like am I getting a performance bump in terms of gun handling? Those are much, much more nuanced now. And I kind of translate those, or I think those are all coming from a consistency standpoint rather than any, like, I don't think I'm getting faster or anything like that. I don't think I'm at the top end of what I can do actually physically moving to the gun, but I would say like I'm getting pretty close in terms of gun handling.
And you would attribute this, how much of it to the just sticking on that set of gear?
I think it's all just to sticking on that set of gear.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, once the gun, especially from concealment, right? The only thing that I'm viewing that's really different is, you know, the first, I would say, kind of the first 6/10 of the draw movement.
Yeah.
Once I get to that point where my other hand is mated up to the gun, it doesn't matter what kind of holster it came out of.
Okay. You got to give me another idea here. So I find, especially when I'm going between different holsters, different gear, like I have that one retention belt that you gave me with the rifle pouch on it, the green one, where
Yep.
it's a leg strap holster, so the gun sits lower at kind of an inconvenient angle, versus a competition belt, the gun sits up higher at a very convenient angle because the holster is adjustable in that way. Versus I have other retention holsters that are different, and etc. When you use the same holster, well, how about this? When I'm using different holsters, I try not to monkey with the gear all the time, unless I'm going to shoot a match with it or I really need it to work. I just kind of use it and I try to work around if it feels a little bit uncomfortable. But when I sit on the same gear for a long time, let's say I'm prepping for a big match and I'm just going to shoot that same gun, same gear, then I feel like I start to understand the equipment better, and then I might make changes to my setup. So for you, you're working with an appendix rig. I find that that's a very sensitive situation in terms of setup, right? The exact holster, like the padding you're using, all of that shit, right?
Yeah, but it's also it's one that I'm super familiar with. The position on where I want it. Every time I put it on, it's the gun and holster setup that I carry, every day. So it's always set up the same way. Has already gone through that process, like what you're talking about, where I've tweaked it to the point it sits exactly where I like it to. It's comfortable. I actually carry it from sort of a deeper concealment, like carrying it for real, not a level of concealment that works on the range where it doesn't matter kind of if you're printing or anything like that.
What are you trying to say here about the Instagram instructors, Matt?
I'm not. No, but
So I feel
I
like
think
that
that's
was a not too subtle type of shot you're taking there, buddy.
it
Which I
wasn't a.
appreciate. I'm like, yeah. Now it's fired up. Yeah, baby.
No, but I think there is, there's a lot of different ways from my experience when I carrying a gun for work. There's a lot of different ways to conceal it, right? And it's all based around kind of situational factors on like what is the potential outcome if somebody sees or notices that I have a gun, and that determines, you're weighing all that stuff, likelihood of having an issue that you need to use the gun versus how concealed it needs to be, where are you carrying it, all that stuff, I think plays into it, rather than like, hey, I want to, I'm shooting this exercise and it's very gun handling focused, with super fast, kind of performance metrics. And I would probably set the gun up a little bit different.
Okay. I mean, that makes sense, but it sounds like basically concealing it for real is a little bit different than, I mean, even if you're in a place where it legally doesn't matter if you're printing a little bit, somebody notices that, where that's not a legal issue, then whatever.
Right. Yeah. I think if you're carrying in anywhere and you're a concealed carry guy and it's all legal, nobody gives a shit if they see a little bit of bulge in your t-shirt or something like that, rather than if you're trying to carry in a place where you're not supposed to be carrying a gun, that if somebody were to suspect that you're carrying and make a big deal out of it, that the outcome could be a little bit different.
Yeah. Well, that, sir, that makes sense to me. Yeah, good. All right, let's move on to rifle dry fire training. Now, me being me, I want to try to get that level of familiarity and comfort so I can tell you what I've been working on. Long stages or scenarios with the rifle, like static shooting at mid-range or close targets, move backwards on engage some targets, stop and shoot like mid-range or long-range targets, like 50 to 80 yards simulated, then a long movement, then stop and shoot close range, then shoot, 50-meter targets simulated, maybe have a reload in there, like really long scenarios, long stages. And I'm running these without a timer, just trying to get comfortable with the gun to where I feel like it's like what I'm doing is consistent. Like no matter the circumstance, whether I'm moving forward, backward. Does that make sense? Like I'm just trying to get
Yeah.
really comfortable.
Yeah.
All right. So that is what I've been working on hard the last week. Like running it hard with the rifle, moving through reloads, all that. Okay. The problem that I'm running into is I would say it's twice as tiring as a handgun is in terms of the physicality that the gun takes.
I agree with that 100%. Like it just, I mean, twice as tiring. Gun, the gun weighs, 4 or 5 times as much as typical pistols and things like that. And then how you connect to it and kind of the stuff that we've explored with how you're actually mounting gun in that connection, it's exhausting at times, right? When you're doing everything correctly.
Yes. So what I find is that, so I'm going through and I set it up so I've targets at different angles. Could be left, right, 90-degree swings all over the place, that kind of stuff. And as you know, with the rifle, it's very difficult to maintain that connection as those transitions start to get wider. It's a much different challenge with a handgun, I would say, than a rifle.
Yeah. Oh, it's a way different. You meaning it? Yeah, it's significantly harder with as you're gonna try to mitigate tension, right? You've got to say you have a 90-degree swing or even farther where you have to change your foot position. Then, in order to do that fast, you're going to have to lighten the connection to the gun, and there's another problem to readdress. So as you start coming up on target, you're trying to reestablish that connection in terms of pressure, feel, like tactile, what you actually feel on the gun versus your shoulder, and then mirror that or mimic that perfectly to what you had for the previous target.
Yeah, it's to me, it's almost so much like I can feel as I start to twist to my left, my left arm has an easier time staying connected. As I twist to the right, it's difficult to put the same pressure in with my support side. But it's easy at the same time to add tension into my shoulders and try to whip the rifle over there to be faster, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I really notice all those tension changes in my torso as I'm doing this.
Yeah, and I think for a lot of guys that aren't, even if they're dry firing a lot with pistols, and they're now starting to, based off of kind of adaptive rifle, and now they've got, there's times out there for a lot of different things. They can kind of frame dry fire training, but dry fire training with the rifle is different in that you have to notice all of those tension changes, and there's times when you're going to completely relax to be able to slide the gun to another target, wide transitions, have it be very, very precise and stop, and then have to reapply all those pressures to the gun.
Right. And that's, I should say, to explain to people, that's exactly why I'm doing this training. So I'm setting this up. It's like, all right, let's take away the timer, just go through this scenario aggressively, but really pay attention to what's happening. Right. And I'm working through that stuff. And this comes after doing like a month's worth of like doubles and bill drills with the rifle to start to understand that connection. And now in the dry fire environment, I can, I have some practical experience shooting the gun so that when I'm doing the dry fire, I can feel when the tension changes and like, hey, that's not the connection I need. That's not going to be the right behavior from the gun if I was shooting live ammo, that kind of thing. I just have to be very honest with myself.
Yes. And that's one of the things I think that's extremely difficult because of what you can get away with the rifle. You take the recoil away and how fast you can pull the trigger, and how little dot movement you will actually see in dry fire on, say, even a 20 or 30 yard simulated target, that if you're not completely honest about like what you should see is almost no movement in the dot on the desired like point of impact or point of aim.
Yeah.
That's what I kind of look for. And it's funny that you've gotten to not using the timer because I've been doing that for a couple years now, pretty consistently, where the pace that I'm training at is like max aggression to get the max aggression level that I can have from a performance side with max consistency with rifle and pistol. And then the time starts to be irrelevant.
Well, sure. I wouldn't say I've gotten to it. It's kind of a regression for me. It's kind of like taking a step back and being like, all right, I really understand with a pistol how these times need to lay out. And if I want to push myself, the timer is a really good way. Like being honest, the consistency isn't where I want it right now anyway, on a stage setting with my rifle. As far as all
Yeah.
those different challenges that I talked about, like 90-degree swings, all these different target types in the same scenario. Like, I mean, I was doing one setup today where I'd start shooting like 50, 60 yards straight in front of me, then engaging targets while I walked backwards, then shooting at a different angle than that. Like I'd 90-degree transition and shoot other stuff, then some more shooting on the move. I think it's craziness, like very
Yeah.
complex scenarios. And I can't string stuff together with the consistency I want anyway. So it seemed like taking the timer away and just work the consistency for a while. Then I'll bring it back for specific drills later.
Yeah. I think it's harder too with the rifle if you've got simulated farther distances to come up with goal times. Like with pistol, kind of 20 yards and in simulated, it's really easy. Okay, this is where I want the draw to be. This is where I want that transition to be. You add those up, and those numbers are usually doable, I would say. But with what I find with the rifle, if you start adding those up in terms of goals of what you know is actually possible and where you want to be in a longer thing like that, that number becomes becomes much more difficult to hit in terms of a par time.
Yeah. Yes. Well, there's the difference between what's possible with your rifle and what's repeatable every time with the kind of level of training where it's at right now. It's
is way different.
yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's a big gap there.
Yes. That's interesting that you and I see that. We see that the same way, I think, that there's a big gap between what's possible and what guys can actually do, even guys that you'd consider very good.
Yeah, no, I think it is. I think anybody that's putting in a lot of effort onto the practical side of training with a rifle, you see like there's so much more meat on the bone. Even like if you just take CQB warm up, like I think those times are kind of good goal times, but they're not even close to what you can actually do.
Yeah.
With an
Yeah.
like with the 85% accuracy standard.
Now, how about this? What would you say about pistol shooting? I mean, paint with a broad brush. Would you say there's as much meat on the bone, more meat on the bone, same?
I think in terms of it, then it's more like distance variation, right? I think with pistol shooting, what there becomes less meat on the bone, the more that somebody begins to understand kind of predictive shooting, right? At farther distances.
I would say the pistol is better understood. Just because we've had games built around it for a long time. Probably.
Yeah, I agree with that. That and obviously it's better understood too in terms of there's a ton of data metrics out there, historical metrics of like the best dudes in the world shooting standardized drills under, you know, stressful conditions.
Yeah.
So guys kind of take that as, hey, okay, yeah, it's easier to understand, hey, this is what is actually possible. Not like conceptually possible, like what, hey, someone has executed this before under these conditions.
That's like half of it is knowing a thing is possible, I think.
I agree. Yeah. It's, you see somebody do it and it's a lot easier. You see them do it live and then you have to believe that you're able to do it. get a glimpse of that, and then that kind of pushes training to a level that you probably weren't at before, I think.
Okay. Maybe I agree with you, but okay, there's one other thing we should talk about. And I told you, like, hey, this is what I'm doing for my rifle reloads. Now, previously, I've been doing primarily bolt lock reloads and dry fire. So I drop out an empty rifle mag, load to a mag with dummies in it, then hit the slide stop or the bolt release and,
Yep.
carry on with the drill. Okay. That's kind of a pain in the ass to set up for obvious reasons. And I feel like once you're proficient with that, it's better just use 30 round magazines filled with 30 rounds of dummy rounds, obviously, and just bolt forward,
Yeah.
change mags.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's the learning curve on even if you're not using a bad lever or any type of device that allows you to release it with your firing hand. The mechanics of how you hold the mag coming up, hitting that the bolt release after the reload, the learning curve on that is very steep. It's very easy to become proficient at that. The hard part that I see that fucks people up with reloads is you take a 30 round magazine with 30 rounds in it, bolts forward, and then beginning to understand how minimum inputs and torquing of that magazine, what that does to the consistency of the reload. And that's where I would say that's more difficult. One, it's easier to set up, like you said, in dry fire, and it's going to be what you get away from that, I think is better than, you get the magazine close to an open bolt on an AR, it's going to latch every time. You put guys under pressure, whether it's a little reloading while moving or just a very tight time constraint for a reload, you start to see some weird stuff in terms of they completely disconnect from the rifle. So you have this rifle that's kind of like floating out in the middle of nowhere. So the magazine well's moving, and then trying to get a magazine in there. And with both of them kind of moving out in front of their face, they start to really torque the magazine, rotationally torque it and front to back, which all of that makes it very difficult for that magazine to seat.
Yeah, so you can kind of work on that problem.
Yeah, with
easily.
a 30 round,
yeah.
30 round mag, you'll see, like we talked about this, where it's really, really aggressive, fast right in there, and then everything has to calm down for you to apply the pressure. And I just like, sliding it up. I don't do any like extra hit or a more aggressive push, just kind of seat it really easily, because you've seen before a 30 round mag seats very, very easily in the gun.
Yeah, provided it's perfectly positioned and the pressure goes straight in. In that case, it will seat easy. But like you're saying, the rotational pressure on there, you're gonna have big problems.
That's where I see, fucks everybody up on the reloads, especially as you start applying a little bit of pressure. So to me, it makes the most sense in terms of maximizing time and training value and everything, just do the reloads with 30 dummy rounds in there. And that's still an interesting debate too, where I've heard guys very, very recently talk about you cannot seat a 30 round magazine.
Now, where's that wisdom from? Because that's like an old thing, right?
I think it's, I don't know. Who'd be a good person to ask about that is Pannone. I guarantee you he's got like the history on it, but I'm sure it's.
Are you profiling him?
No, but he has
because
all
he's
that.
Old? Because that's why I would ask him. I'd feel like, oh, you're old. You might know. I feel like this was a long time ago.
Because he was there when it first came out. No, I think it.
Yeah. He'll tell us like back in NAM, like what happened.
Of probably like magazine design at the time, and then there was an understand like, hey, if you, because of those not understanding the training side of it, that 28 rounds or 29 rounds is going to seat easier, which it will, because there's more give. That part of it is that, and then also just, I mean, for years there was a misunderstanding that leaving magazines loaded somehow degraded the spring.
Yes.
And
People didn't
where,
understand that it was like about cycles on the spring. It wasn't about.
right.
Yeah.
And it's just, but that's how all the gun community is, where somebody says something 3 times and nobody laughs, that becomes dogma.
Oh, God. So true.
Shoot.
Well, Matt, do we have anything else to talk about tonight? A nice, relaxed Redneck Live.
I think it's pretty good, man.
Was pretty good. I'll put it up. It'll be Redneck Live about rifle training, dry fire, all that good shit, and how to be a Navy SEAL operator, all that stuff.